एक मिनट मी
तुम्ही
इंट्रोड्यूस
स्टार्ट
करतो.
करा.
हां,
तुम्ही
या.
स्टार्ट करा.
Yes. So welcome everyone to this wonderful session about the challenges of climate change and our energy needs by Dr. Shivaji Seth, who is a PhD nuclear engineer from MIT. So before I proceed to the this particular session and introduce Dr. Seth, few house rules. House rules are like, please try to mute yourself and put your videos off, so that it won't get any distraction, any background noise and all those things. So please mute yourself and your videos in a off mode. Another rule is that we will hold the questions at the end. The chances are there that when you look into the slides which Dr. Seth will be presenting, you might have some questions, but those questions might get answered into the subsequent slides. So please hold your questions till the end. And at the end, then you can unmute yourself and ask the questions, or you can put it into the chat, which I will read it out to Dr. Seth and he will answer those questions. So those are the house rules, and let's talk over now to the session. So today's is a very important and very informative session about the climate change. So climate change is the defining issue of our time, and we are at a defining moment. From shifting weather patterns that threaten food production to rising sea levels that increases the risk of catastrophic flooding, the impact of climate change are global in scope and unprecedented in scale. Without drastic action today, adapting to these impact in the future will be more difficult and costly. And as you all know, the US has withdrawn itself from the world's battle against climate change, but the issue is in the forefront of our news and debates on the divergent energy policies to reduce levels of greenhouse gas emission and control global warming. Starting with a simple factual picture of our use of diverse energy sources, this presentation will focus on the current as well as the primary alternative strategies being discussed to meet the enormous challenge of achieving a carbon-free energy economy. Dr. Shivaji Seth worked in the national laboratories, the industry, and has served for over 3 decades in senior advisory capacity with the US government. Dr. Seth is an emeritus member of the American Nuclear Society. So I welcome Dr. Shivaji Seth and now hand over the control to Dr. Shivaji Seth to further enlighten us on this important topic. Dr. Shivaji?
Yes. Thank you so much, Aniruddha. I think I really thank you so much for the introduction, and your preliminary remarks are perfect, right on the target. So thank you. You got me started there quite well. Um, Before we begin, I really want to really acknowledge, compliment Uttarang, MKM, and Uttarang for taking the initiative when the COVID crisis began. And I mean, this may be one of the big silver linings that it has made. They put together this virtual meeting place and 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 established a platform that has had such a wide reach. Today, as you see, you have people here from the West Coast and all over the place, and the reach has been wide. And Uttarang has brought such beautiful entertainment and informational programs. And this platform, this virtual meeting place, is probably going to be there forever. It's not going to go away. So I want to congratulate the leadership, Aniruddha, Bakre, and other people who support him. Also, I would like to specially thank Rajni Zoglekar for suggesting that. This is, as you heard already, it's a controversial subject. It's has been recently in all these debates, and without knowing my positions on these, or we've never had a discussion to really elaborate uh, my views on this subject. But without knowing that, she had the full confidence and suggested that I speak and invited me. So I hope I can justify her confidence in me. And also, I know that the audience is very diverse today, not just language wise, but interest wise. And one thing that's common is all of you are professionals with uh, considerable knowledge about this subject, know all the nuances. And so it's really a great privilege for me to talk to this audience. It's a great honor, and thank you so much for doing that. And also, it's a you all have taken important time from your schedules to hear this talk, and I want to do my best to absolute best to make it worthwhile for you. So we'll go to the first slide, and I'll elaborate a little bit on the objective. I see an enormous problem here. You see, we have at least 4 different groups of people with views. They're those who deny, they're deniers. Then there is a group that accept global warming, but they think that it may not be because of human activities. It's a natural kind of a thing, it'll go away. Then there are people who think that no, it's true, we have to do everything possible for it. Their side, and they're pushing renewable energy sources, for example, and they think that we should just go all over and that will solve the problem. And then there is yet another group that is somewhere in the moderate. They say, well, we cannot go all the way to the end. We just cannot stop some of the resources that we depend on, the hydrocarbons, the fossil fuels, for example. And so there is a time that is needed before we transform. So there are these various groups and discussions between these groups, opinions, debates, and so on. I would like to tell you that even those people who believe in global warming may fail to understand the big problem that we have. It's an enormous problem, especially when you combine it with the fact that we need our energy sources for the future. See, shutting down energy sources or reducing our power, that is not an option, right? We may even talk about that a little bit later. But it's an enormous problem when you take both these things together, global warming and our energy needs. And that is the reason why I chose to talk about this. And this together is a very enormous problem. The other thing is that we are not necessarily learning from politicians and even media the full truth on this. We keep talking about global warming. We have talked about those fires and hurricanes and drought and flooding in the world. So that is being talked about quite a lot. But in terms of how we meet our energy needs, many people think that, hey, if you go full blast at the solar and wind, we will solve the problem. So today, I'm going to do my best to take you to a vantage point where you are going to see how enormous the problem is and how much bold thinking and transformative changes we will need to make. It is mind-boggling what we need to do. Believe me, folks, really. And in fact, if we could take a poll later on, I don't know how to do it. Maybe Aniruddha has an idea, our sponsor. If simple. Were you surprised or not when you got to the destination? So I would like to take you on a ride, if you will, that'll take you to a like a going to the top of a mountain where you see the full picture. You may see some alternative paths to go there too. It's going to be a vantage point that I want to take you to. And like a journey that we take to a destination, to a nice, beautiful place, we don't want to stop at every turn. So let's go on, unless there are some very urgent clarifying issues. Let me take you to the end, because I think that your thoughts, your questions that may come up as we approach the end, or we are at the end, will be will have more context, and you will yourself see the significance more. So most of my presentation is basically uh, pictures, slides, graphics, and hopefully you will enjoy seeing them. We would be able to make quick progress through those slides. So we should proceed along those lines. The outline is broad. This is the kind of the roadmap. We are going to talk about global warming in the first few slides. I'm not going to talk about the consequences that you often hear. Again, the fires and the hurricanes and the frequency increasing. There is a lot of very powerful data which some people don't believe, but that the frequency of storms is increasing and fires, those kinds of parameters. But we are not going to go there. Rather, my focus is how can we be prudent, believing that it could be our activities that cause it, and you're going to see in the next few slides. If it is, how to be prudent and try to avoid the havoc that could be created if we do have this climate change, if for those people who still may doubt it. So we are going to look at the global warming a little bit. Then we can derive what we need to do in the US. Look at our energy sources, how we use them. How could we reduce the CO2 emissions? Try to go down to top some of the targets that have been presented. Many of them have fallen by the wayside, by the way. But how to do our best and kind of drill down into our energy use and kind of identify those that are important and where we could reduce the emissions. Then we will look at some of the projections with current strategies and some alternatives. And then come to the point, it's just a very broad outline, come to discussing our big dilemma and our challenge. So that is the overall strategy. And of course, then at the end, we can talk about potential approaches. As I said, your thoughts are going to be important. I know there are people in this audience who are very, very informed. So, with all my eyes and ear open, I'd like to hear those thoughts too. It is really, again, my great privilege to address this subject. Let's go to the next slide. Okay. So here you see these cycles over hundreds of thousands of years. These are cycles caused by the slight swinging of the orbit of the Earth around the sun, such that we may get more sunlight, more warming, and that warming releases more carbon into the atmosphere. So that's why we have these cycles which may correspond to that. There are still people looking at exactly the causes, but this is observed from deep core samples, even in snow, going very deep and examining the uh, the concentration of air long time ago. Now, millions of years ago, the temperatures were much higher, 3, 4 degrees Fahrenheit. I'll try to stick to Fahrenheit because we are all kind of familiar with Fahrenheit. As although as a scientist I use centigrade, so there is always a little switching problem. But so I'll try to stick with that. So 4, 5 degrees, 3 to 5 degrees Fahrenheit was a higher temperature. There are 15, 20 feet higher level of water um, before. And then as vegetation, forestation grew, carbon dioxide levels came, there has been this kind of a balance uh, going on. And you see that here is the carbon dioxide in parts per million in the atmosphere. 250, 300. 300 was the peak 300,000 years ago. Until you come to the industrial age, something around the mid 19th century, and ouch, you see, it's gone up. This is 2019, 410 parts per million, the highest ever reached. Temperatures have gone up, concentrations have gone up 100 times faster than the other cycles. For example, we do know that 11 to 14,000 years ago there was an ice age, and when we came out, there was this increase, but this is 100 times more increase than that. Here you see in the next slide to the naysayers who this is a kind of, some people call it the hockey stick curve. So here you see the dependence on the carbon dioxide and the concentrations that you saw in the previous, and the carbon dioxide emissions. You see again coming from 1840 to going up. And you may see that there is some kind of a dependence that is correlated here, that with the emissions rising, the global concentrations rising, they're kind of correlated. And when CO2 gets more, it amplifies the effect that you saw in those cycles. Now let's talk a little bit about why CO2. Let me put you all on the same kind of page. Some of you know this carbon dioxide, and so far I've taken for granted that you know this CO2 concentrations and this, but let's take a moment to understand why we talk about CO2. Because there are many other greenhouse gases. There are, for example, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxides, there is ammonia, there are hydrofluorocarbons, perfluorocarbons. They don't behave like oxygen and nitrogen. The more complex the molecules, the heat that they absorb from the earth takes longer time to radiate. So it is, if you will, like a brick in a fireplace. Gives you, even after the fire is out, it kind of is hot. So that is how the CO2 presence amplifies. Now, why CO2 and not the other gases? Because over 80%, like 82% of the greenhouse gases, CO2 is about 82%. So it's a very large fraction. So other substances, molecule for molecule, are more dangerous. But CO2, we talk about CO2 because it is the predominant. Now, why water vapor is also complicated. It does similar things, but the wavelengths of the CO2 and water vapor, H2O, are different so that water does not mask the effects of the carbon dioxide. So I think this kind of explains to you why we are going to be talking about CO2 all the time. And for those of you who are not familiar with the terminology, I'll be using CO2 and carbon dioxide and even maybe carbon interchangeably, okay? So uh, as we go along. But this shows that dependence of the global concentration with CO2. Okay, next slide shows the global CO2 emissions. Uh, they were rising. You have seen that before in the previous slide, but here I wanted to show you the more recent in the last 3 decades. It's been increasing, and here there is some leveling off, and you're going to see some leveling off in other slides too. And this is coming from various factors. First, there was the huge recession, and I'll cover these factors now because, and we may see a few slides like that, but we can talk about it here. So some of the recent factors that have affected the, the CO2 emissions are the major recession, the economy collapse of 2008, then increased efficiencies of uh, equipment and production sources and so on, focus on renewables to some extent, more so in the world. We are talking about global. So some other countries have made more progress in the renewables. Uh, in our case, it's not yet as much as you will see later on. Then, of course, there is the replacement of coal by gas, which is also kind of brought, brought this down to some extent. And, and not to deny, the weather has been rather kind. It has been milder in the last few years. And so in the winter, we need less heating, and in the summer, less cooling. And that has had effect. So all these factors have affected. And of course, now I might as well tell you that we are expecting perhaps 5 to 10% reductions in these because of the COVID crisis. The economy has gone down, the industrial activity has gone down, and already the, the leaders in the world, the international agency, the UN's time is, they are warning us that this should not lull us into inaction because we need to keep going with these efforts and in fact go full force with renewables to include to provide employment. So they are really concerned that this will drop. In fact, you see some politicians taking already credit for this. You saw 2 days ago in the debate that it was referred to uh, by one of the candidates that recently they have seen a decline in the release. But again, I hope, I mean, we wish it could have been because of the effort on renewables and other sources that we'll talk about um, rather than these convenient factors. Okay. Uh, I would like to then show you this, another slide of global average temperatures, and point out that per decade, it has been increasing roughly 1/8 of a degree Fahrenheit, and more recently, at twice the rate here. Okay, so I just wanted to show you. The temperatures, by the way, 2019, when I say present or all my data, when I say present, I have been able to use the data from December, end of 2019, okay? So this is all for future slides. When I say 2019, I mean literally the end of 2019. And our temperatures here were at least 1 degree centigrade or 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit above the previous century average. Here you see in another slide to mention to you that the 5 of the highest temperatures, I mean, annual temperature averages have been in the last 5 years. And the last 10 highest, nine actually, nine of the 10 highest have been in the last 15 years. So you see some of that here, and you also see this swing going up. What you see as a level line here is really the average, the century average, previous century average here as a reference point, and these show the temperatures. Um, Again, US is not divorced from the global, right? So here you see the same reflection, 1.5 to, if you kind of trend it, per century, like about a 1.5 degree Fahrenheit. So we are in the same boat. That is just to confirm those people who say, well, we may be different. So it's for those people. Now, based on the UN work and the UN climate scientists, you've heard about, many of you probably heard about the International uh, Panel on Climate Change, IPCC. This is part of the UN Framework Convention that was formed, and they have done phenomenal work in looking at worldwide scenarios and created scenarios to examine depending on the release of carbon dioxide versus time. And each of these bands, by the way, and they have their own code names, and you can some of them may be given in the slide here. But each of these bands is actually it shows the uncertainty over hundreds of scenarios. So if I've looked at these diagrams and you will see lines going through, I wanted to pick this one because this kind of shows the band and summarizes. You don't see those zillions of lines. And it shows as if you didn't do no climate policies change, it shows how the temperature would keep going up. But more to the point, the recommendation that they made, and even at the Paris Climate Accord, uh, to keep the temperatures down to 1.5 degrees centigrade, we need to reduce, to go kind of carbon free by the middle of this century, to 2050, to attempt to do that. And by 2030, at least reduce it. This is global, but I will try to relate that very quickly later on for the US. But on this slide, I just want to tell you that this gives you a reference to see what the US should be doing. So we can take cues from here and derive, and which people have done. Environmental agencies like the EPA, the executive orders that were issued earlier, 4, 5, 6 years ago, those relied on these analyses too. So I wanted to show you that there is a basis for that, for drawing your own targets, if you will, but using that as a guide for contribution towards the global. So now we'll begin to come down to the US and rather focus down to, rather than global, we'll begin to come to the US picture. I did want to show you one other slide, which is global, has a global significance. We like to point fingers to the developing countries like China, which have twice the emissions of the US at present. And we say, well, China has to do much more. They're talking about bending the curve in 2030. And India should do more. And we like to point those fingers to them. And the fact that US has been asked to contribute towards these countries too, to help their technologies. This slide shows that if you look at the historic emissions, you'll find that this is about 4 to 5 more than China's. So while China, and you know, it is manufacturing for the world, it's a huge manufacturing place and gigantic economy. And I'll even say it right now. I mean, just a few weeks ago, President Xi announced that he will be trying to bend the curve and begin to get lower emissions by 2060. That was his goal. And that itself, sorry, he will begin to get, it was earlier, but try to reduce to carbon neutral by 2060. And this announcement a few weeks ago was a game changer. The world hailed it, actually. And China may be taking a lead here in coming out forefront to set these goals. Now, for China to say 2060 carbon neutral, and we'll talk about these carbon neutral terms a little bit later, but net zero carbon, if you will, these, for China to say that is quite important because it's a huge economy and it's doing probably more than anybody else in terms of trying to bend the curve. So this was a major announcement. But again, coming to the point here, we have caused a lot of this pollution and should be taking the responsibility too in trying to lead the world and contribute. So some of these thoughts may bear much more towards the end, but I wanted to show them on this slide. Okay, so now I want to show you for the US. I said it was not an option to close down our economy or begin to close down. Here in the blue, don't worry about the units too much. You probably see it there on the right side, the units, but this is the march of the gross national product, close to $20 trillion. You see primary energy here also increasing. And again, I'm not going to repeat all the factors for leveling. You see, people can make out all these peaks by some of those factors that I said. So don't get lulled into that. That's what everybody, all the knowledgeable people are telling us. Don't think that this thing, because, why? Because as the GNP keeps progressing, this will also progress. Its march will go up. And the red line shows our electricity generation. You are going to see this in later curves too. Again, a little bit of flattening, but the march goes on. On an average, we may be increasing like 1% every year. And I have been following these numbers since about 40 years, 50 years. And I have actually noticed this march all the time. Some of the first lectures I gave were back in early 80s. And so I've seen all of this growth here. So I can tell you from my own, this thing keeps marching on. And so once the COVID crisis is gone and we begin to increase our GNP, why? We will be, again, continuing with this march. So I wanted to show the proportionality of the GNP, primary energy release, electrical energy. And this leveling, by the way, is also coming from increased electric efficiency too. We are substituting more efficient appliances, and you know that, from the older times. So that has helped level our electricity too. So that's another factor for electricity. Here we see that same curve again on CO2 emissions. I should mention now that a lot of the slides you are going to see, based on many of them, my own portrayal and my analysis, are based on data which is, I think, the most reliable, most independent, most thorough, most user-friendly, and that is the data coming from the independent agency, which is the Energy Information Agency. You can go to the website and you will be able to do my results. You will be able to create your own analysis and own scenarios, if you will. So those slides that have included my analysis, my portrayal, do have my name on it. I take the full responsibility for those slides, and that's the reason I put my name on it. So this is our total CO2 emissions. So beginning to talk about numbers, we peaked around 6 gigatons, 6 billion tons, okay? 6 billion tons. And sometimes you will see in million, so this is 6 billion. And now we are close to 5 billion. And we mentioned the targets. So let me mention to you a few. As I said, some of them have become obsolete because people talked about reaching certain goals by 2020 or 2025, and they became impractical. So we can't even talk about some of the goals. But perhaps the most notable was the one which was issued by President Obama by executive order in December 2015. And he talked about, and he asked, directed also the EPA and so on to work on that, is the 40% reduction from 1990 level by 2025. And that would amount to something like 4 gigatons, 4 billion tons. So by 2025, so here you see my cursor, and some roughly there maybe. Yeah, it should be somewhere. Anyway, keep that in mind as a goal as you go through the slides. These numbers, you're going to get a different perspective on the end, but if you want to just keep some numbers in mind, that may be a number to remember. Then, based on the UN studies that we talked about, the Paris Accord, it would be by 2025 roughly 4.5, and by 2050 or 2035, 2.5 gigatons. Okay, so those numbers by 2035. Now, in January of this year, the UN climate scientists made a strong recommendation. This was before the COVID crisis, by the way, so January 2020. And they recommended that we reduce carbon emissions by 7.6% every year for the next 10 years. And so that would take us to roughly 2.5 billion tons, gigatons, sorry, 2.5 gigatons by 2035. 2035, I'll come to that in a minute, because now people are shifting their target, if you will. So from 2025, some of those goals have now gone to 2035, and reduce it even further down to 2050, and that would come to something like 0.5 gigaton. So those are even more stringent. But let us talk about some of the goals that have been thrown out right now by the Democratic platform and Biden, because they have been brought out recently too in debates. And there are nuances here that you have to note. And I will just cover those nuances in a moment. But let me tell you that the Democratic platform and the Biden platform talk about reaching a goal of, they're not throwing out tons here, but they're saying no net zero emissions from power sources. They're not talking about energy releases, but just power production, reducing that, making it net zero by 2035. So remember that. Net zero power production, net zero release of carbon from power production, and going also to 2050, carbon neutral or net zero carbon emissions economy wide. That's what the Biden plan calls it. And you heard that 2 days ago too. So these are the two goals that they are throwing out. Now, what are the nuances? I tell you, you have to be very careful because media, politicians, they all get confused with this. So the first nuance came with first people were talking about energy releases in general without necessarily distinguishing between power sources because transportation is a huge problem that you are going to hear soon. And we are releasing gases. Now, is that included or not? I would certainly include it as part of the economy wide that uh, the candidates talk about. So, but not, it's not power sources. So, one thing to recognize when you hear somebody throwing out a target, you have to be careful. Are they talking about all energy releases or only from power sources? Or are they talking all economy wide? So that is one thing. The second nuance here is, and that has also confused our one candidate Biden in debating. When in the beginning he was talking about releases, now he's systematically using the term energy neutral or uh, zero net release. And this again moves the target further down because we are now allowing use of carbon. So you have to hear carefully what the goals are. Are they talking about releases or are they talking about carbon neutral? So that the words carbon neutral in these platforms, in these plans, in these targets give you the leeway now to say that, well, we are going to capture the carbon dioxide. We don't have a technology, is still demonstrational, and I hope that we can talk about it later, very expensive. But it allows you to say, okay, by 2050, we will develop these technologies and get carbon neutral. So that is another nuance and another kind of leeway that they have given themselves. So moving the targets, moving the definition of what they call it, and talking about zero energy, zero release versus zero net zero. So these are all the things that you have to be careful of. Here you see again gas increasing, coal decreasing. We have made rapid progress. By the way, that those emissions going down, one reason I did tell you is the use of gas and replacement of coal. So indeed, coal is going down and gas is going up. And the oil, most of it used in, and most of it used in transport is holding steady. So that is, and you may see the terms that I'm using interchangeably, petroleum or oil. Oil is a nice three-letter short, short form, but and petroleum is derived from that. So uh, we'll just use that interchangeably. Okay. So let me go to the next one. Okay, this gives you the primary energy sources, and we have had tremendous ingenuity in exploring those. Are all the sources here? No, there are many that have yet to be commercialized. They are in the experimental stages, or they will never be commercialized because they're too expensive. So I'm talking about powers like from tidal waves to beaming solar energy from the space. Someday they may become true, and we may be able to commercialize them, but we are still not there, and so, things have yet to develop. But these are our major resources. You see that 80% of our primary resources today meaning again 2019 end, right? It hasn't changed much, is derived from fossil fuels. And remember where these fossil fuels came from? We talked about forestation in the very first things, right? Over the eons, these forests got buried. They came under deep pressure, lot of heat, and they burned under snow, deep snow. There were fires that were raging and burning for hundreds of years. Some say even thousands of years they were burning. And that turned into coal. We also have oil with higher hydrogen to carbon ratio coming from, where does the oil come from? From the animals that died over these eons and were deposited on the continental shelf. No doubt we have so much petroleum oil on the continental shelf. If you look at the map and the continental shelf of all the continents, there is a lot of oil, petroleum. And so this is all coming from the sea life and gas too, with a higher hydrogen to carbon. So these are all hydrocarbons, we call it. Many of you know that. And we have found many, many uses for these. And in fact, I won't get into that, but you know that plastic, synthetic fibers, solvents, paints, name what you will, they're all over the place that we are using. They're all coming from hydrocarbons. So raising the CO2, burning them, we are putting back the carbon dioxide in a very short time. Here is the key thing then, from all that you have heard right now. By burning so much fossil fuels, and we were doing more. By the way, when I started looking at these figures, we used to be burning back in the 80s something like nearly 25% or more, even coal. Now we have reduced coal. But here, still, we are burning and putting back the CO2 back in a very short time compared to all those hundreds of thousands of years of balance that you saw. So this is our main problem. And it's such a waste because this resource will not be available. Let's say it is gone after 1,000 years. So isn't man foolish to do that? It would be criminal. Well, I can hear women saying, yeah, man, that's right. What I mean is mankind. Actually, the women may be right. Man was in charge, right, for all these years. But we have been foolish to do that, to burn all this. It is really criminal to be able to do that and deprive the future generations. And when I say future, what perspective should we have? Let me ask you right now, turn around, answer this question. How long will mankind be around? And when I ask this question, some people will say, oh, maybe in a few decades we'll blow ourselves up. That is the standard answer from some WMD, right? We'll blow ourselves up. Some people take a longer view, hundreds, thousands of years. But let me tell you, dinosaurs, we know that asteroid destroyed them 65 million years ago, and they lived from around 200 million to 65 million. That's 135 million years. And man, Homo sapien, we have found the oldest fossil, 300,000, but most people say that Homo sapiens date back to, say, 200 to 300,000 years, Homo sapiens. So that's truly a fraction of the time dinosaurs lived. We should be wiser than the dinosaurs and be thinking about millions of years. So moving along here, you see a glimmer of hope, this slice of solar. These are all our so-called renewables. I call them so-called renewables, supposed to be, they're all renewables, but not all carbon-free. Here, 5% of the 11% is biomass, and it does emit carbon dioxide, but we include them as renewals. Meanwhile, nuclear, which is here, is 100% clean. There is no emission, is not included. And this subject will come up later on too. But this is the, and I've tried to keep throughout these colors generally constant. So you'll see blue for water, hydro. We have pretty much exhausted our hydro capacity. Wind and solar are the two energies we are focusing on, and you are going to be hearing a lot about that. And this is geothermal. So that is our whole range of uh, resources right now. And here, as I said, is the ray of hope that we have to look to the future. Why? Because, and I'm for it, because I just told you, if you have that million-year perspective for Homo sapien, then all these resources that we have talked about will be gone. And we have to rely on solar and perhaps fusion. So scientists have called it solstice, solar fusion era. So we have these two to depend on. But enlarging solar and wind is certainly in the right direction. Let's move on then. And so where does all that energy go to? I want to go through the next few slides very quickly to tell you that naturally there are four major sectors: residential, commercial, industrial, and transportation. A lot of it is going into electricity. Red is the electricity part, and this is the non-electric use, and uh, especially important for carbon dioxide emission is the gas here, because now we have reduced burning coal for this purpose. We do use it for electricity still, about a quarter of it. So that is here. So we'll talk about this electricity vector uh, separately and talk a little bit more about. So here in this slide, I pulled out all those red tops and put them by the side. And we are going to drill down to see where the lower hanging fruit is, where we can try to focus our energy and reduce the CO2. So you see that 30%, 37% of that primary energy is going into electric. So certainly that is one of the things we are talking about. And no wonder by 2035, all these goals are talking about trying to reach zero or net zero emissions by 37. This net zero is coming on more and more people, as I said, they get more comfort when they use net zero because they allow that carbon capture. This is the non-electric use. And I would like to tell you that this is rather stubborn, hard to decarbonize, because this residential is primarily the gas used is used for heating. In some places, cooking, washing clothes. Commercial also uses it for similar purpose. Sometimes combined power systems, commercial facilities use outside lighting. But again, this is more carbon. Now we have pulled out the electricity part. Remember, we have pulled out the electricity part. So lighting is here, sorry. So this is all the gas part. Industrial gas, again, hard to decarbonize. Please remember this, because industry is using more and more gas instead of electricity that they were using, because gas is a lot cheaper. So they're moving in that direction. But again, it's hard to decarbonize because industry uses gas as not only for process heat, combined cycle systems, power generation, and also as a feedstock for chemicals, fertilizers, so many other products that you get in the market and then you are using. So that is all industrial, which is very hard to decarbonize it. So let me call it, instead of hard to decarbonize, it's longer term, I'm going to use it, call it stubborn. So this is all rather very stubborn and is not going to allow us to decarbonize, to minimize CO2 from this. So remember this point as we go through the next slides. There is this quote unquote stubborn part. And then there is the transportation sector, huge, using a lot of petroleum, oil. And this is a large factor, and it will depend on electrification. And remember, again, something that is going to come up. The more you electrify it, you're going to increase this electricity more, right? So it's not going to come for nothing, because then if as you electrify transportation, you're going to have more electricity to produce, and to produce with zero emissions or net zero, whatever. Okay. Um, so here again, you see CO2 production reflecting what I just mentioned to you. Electricity part and this bulk part, this is, except for the electric part, going to be hard to decarbonize. And here is the petroleum part. So this electricity and transportation, these are the two, I hate to say low hanging fruit because it's still quite high, as you will see. But those are the two targets that result from doing this narrowing down. This summarizes what I just said very briefly. Power, CO2 emissions we are talking about, roughly 5 billion metric tons. This is about 1.5, just keep these numbers, this is not exact, 1.4 or 1 point, just roughly, so that you have some sense of these numbers. 5 billion, 1.5 from the electric. This 37% comes to roughly 2 billion metric tons. So out of 5, 1.5 is here, 2 is here, and this part, which is non-electric, remember, stubborn part. Okay, so 1.5 is here, 1.5 is here, and 2 is here. This we cannot do anything about. And here are the two areas where we are going to talk a little bit more about, because that is all I'm coming to as I narrow down. When you look at historically, again, this is recapping quickly, you see that this is the total electricity produced by gas, coal going down, nuclear holding steady, and in fact going to decline. And way down here is the solar and the wind, okay? Oh, somehow this came. I'm sorry. What happened? I hit the wrong button. I'm sorry. Oh, what happened? Ah, in my emotions, I hit the wrong button. My friends know me. Okay. Let me put on the slide. I lost you guys on the slide too, right? I believe you were on this slide. And
No,
from the
from
current.
currency.
Okay. All right.
And
Pardon me.
Kaka,
Pardon me.
you can again go into the 3 dots and then hide the presenter mode.
Thank you. Okay, and do I have I still have a cursor, right? Do you see a cursor?
I
You
can
do,
see the
right?
cursor, or you can go to the
That's
lower
okay.
left.
If this cursor is there, that's fine.
Okay, yeah.
I don't want to
fine.
waste time. Okay, so we talked about this, and we talked about this. Now, we are going to talk about, remember what we just said, as because of the interruption. This is the picture now, 2019, end of 2019. And we are now going to look forward. Remember, we are trying to look towards 2035 and 2050. These are the goals being talked about. So, yes. So keep this in mind. We are going to make some very aggressive expansions of wind and solar. So this is like 4 to 5 times increase in wind by the time you get there, 2050. And this is like 8 to 9 times increase. And I will mention this, come back to it in a moment, but we see nuclear declining. They're just retiring plants. And a lot of this energy from here, solar and wind, is going to go to replace nuclear. And here you see coal, you saw the decline, but you may recall that in March, President Trump passed the Affordable Care, what was it? No, Energy ACE. Uh, I forget the full, it's Affordable Care Energy Plan or something, ACE, which allows the coal plants to keep functioning provided they meet higher heat rates. So that is a condition there. And so they keep declining. But you know something? The recent decline in coal and what will happen here is that the coal cannot keep up with the gas prices. And when we talk about capture, see, I'm not seeing the, sorry, Aniruddha, I have to ask you to give me the previous. I'm not sure if you are able to see the cursor. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I'm able to see
Oh,
cursor.
okay. As long as you're able to see the
Yeah,
cursor,
yeah,
Yeah,
we can see the cursor. Go ahead.
okay, good. So this coal may not even be there, but I have to allow it because if you meet the current policies, they are going to have this coal, and it may even have the higher standards and possibly carbon capture. So you see that now. Wind and solar, we didn't talk about it when we talked about the sources, but this is extremely challenging because what God gives us free, wind and solar, is also very diffuse, very intermittent. On wind, it's not only site dependent, it's directional dependent. Wind stalls. I can tell you very quickly from my personal experience. I spent 8 years in the Northwest in Tri-Cities, where there was a whole long mountain range called the Red Mountains, topped with windmills. They have to be spaced, by the way, because of the soil conditions and because of the not shadowing the wind. So the whole mountaintop is covered with these windmills, large windmills. And I talked to the plant operator there, the manager, and he told me that in the morning you can begin with stable winds. 15 minutes later, the whole power is gone down. He provides 300 megawatts of power, is gone down just like that. So that solar too is, again, when you look at Southwest California, there are areas where it's kilowatts per meter square, one over that range where you can at least have 1 gigawatt of power if you have 16 square miles of uh, these panels. So you can do that, but you cannot do that everywhere. And nightfall, and again, everything is down. Cloudy weather, you go down. New York has a fraction of what that has there. So over the whole country, you can see the contours where the solar power has been mapped. And it's not everywhere where you can generate a lot of solar electricity. To some extent, yes. We are not talking about water heating. We are talking about large-scale electricity production. Also, what you need is battery storage. Now, when we talk about 2050, we are going to make an assumption that there is 17, close to 20 gigawatts of battery storage available. We don't even have yet those full technologies to do that, but there is promising. Now, these assumptions are not what I am making. These assumptions is what the Energy Information Agency is making based on a lot of policies, based on a lot of studies, based on surveys of utilities, states, and really, as I said, it's a very authoritative source that has made these assumptions, and they're providing 15 to 20 gigawatts of power. Along those lines, I will say that in the transportation, this is also going to require, while we talk about all the challenges for solar and wind, that something like a Tesla, which is a great company, would have to be in capital more than GM, Ford, Toyota, Chrysler, all combined, and have profit margins of like Apple to be able to deliver anything that we are talking about. In fact, in the recent battery day, when the market realized that the prices of the stock price of Tesla had gone 10, 100 times more, and they tried to capitalize it, they realized that it was not so big, and the prices came down. That's just a quick story. But all I want to tell you right now is that this is very challenging. So you see renewable going up, making huge headway. Uh, Let me go one slide up, I think. Yes, and then down. And this shows the solar contribution going very high to nearly 46% of all the renewables, wind going to 33%. This is the assumptions that you are now in the next few slides going to see incorporated. I've used those numbers in the analysis. Okay, so keep that in mind that these are very aggressive goals that are being factored in. And then we see what happens. Okay, here you see again, these are the by groups, coal going down, coal for the reasons I'm saying it is going to go down. Nuclear, by the way, right? You saw 20% of electricity going down to 12. Now filled up with these renewables, and gas being used more for electricity and also by the industry. Summarizes the picture: coal going down, natural gas going up, petroleum going up. Again, those things remain the same, and you see that this is the projected carbon dioxide emissions that you would get in 2050 from the level we are at. This is coming just from, remember 1.5 I told you? So 1.5 billion tons roughly, and coming down. Hardly any big change compared to what people are talking about, right? This shouldn't surprise you, because 65 or 70% people in a recent poll, Pew poll it was, saying that they want government to do more. I don't know whether they recognize all this, but there's a lot of wisdom in what people say. But they want the government to do more, because this is what we are getting to. These are what the projections are. And going from 37% carbon free, that those fractions that renewable you saw, to in 50% is bringing us down only so much. So we are not able to project it out to 2050. So let's lay the patient down here and examine a little bit more. Electric power generation. So where is it now? 2019, we are 20% here, and we are going to see very quickly some slides, which I'll go through rather quickly, and then go to another one that shows the comparison with 2050. So we'll go there. And you see here, the primary energy slide that I showed you is the energy that goes into producing this electricity. So there is something like, 4.1 terawatt hours. I don't want to confuse you with these figures too much, but this is the electricity that we produce. And electricity-wise, solar is 1.8%, wind is 1.4%, and this you're going to see expand. Wind is 7.3%, and all amounts to 18%, right? This is what we call so-called renewables, not including nuclear, which is clean also. Unfortunately, it does not get the same credit as a renewable. I don't know why, because many state policies and people just talk about renewables, neglecting the fact that solar is also clean. In fact, a majority may not even realize that that nuclear does not have any emissions. This shows in a different form out to 2035, and I'll skip that 2025 because it really doesn't make any difference, not much difference, but this is 2035. You see the solar has gone up, wind has gone up at the cost of coal, and again, gas holding at 37%. Here you see the change from, again, let me see if I can get the cursor, yeah. So here you see the change from 2019 to 2050. Indeed, solar has increased by, again, remember those very aggressive assumptions. But this is all it can do, and 13% to the wind. And nuclear has gone down, coal has gone down to 13%. Okay, so this is the 2050 picture. Let's look at transportation. That was one of the areas we talked about. But look, I'm using an example of light duty vehicles, the cars, for example, and simple, which is the biggest category of vehicles where electrification is being attempted, is being done. There are trucks being used, but this is the biggest one. And as an example, it shows that from the total energy use, even making rapidly increasing something like 30 times more than what it is now, it is making only a fractional contribution in transportation. So electricity in 2050 for transportation is also going to remain very low unless we make radical changes. So here do we stand? Am I doing okay, Aniruddha, time-wise? Do we have?
Yeah, we have time, definitely. I mean,
Okay.
I don't know how many more
Yeah,
slides we have.
we have a few more. I mean, few to go to. We are zooming down.
Okay.
I want to give you the picture. Let's focus on 2035. Aniruddha, it would help me if I can go back to the cursor, flash, because what is happening is that this, by moving my pad, it is moving the slides rather than this. So I would rather.
Yeah, so go, just go to the left. Yes, the third one.
Okay, yeah. Thank you for reminding, because yes, it certainly doesn't come to mind. Yes, so this frees up. Okay, this is a little busy slide, but I'd like you to focus just on a few things that I'm pointing to. Focus on 2050, our goal, let's say. You can look at 2035, earlier 2025, which I've removed now from this slide, but making precious little change. So this is the non-electric part. Transportation, this is shown by sectors. Transportation is about half the non-electric, still contributing 3.5. You see, transportation not changing much. There's little reduction minor reduction because of some electrification. Okay. Electric part is this, and this is going down just a little bit. Again, as I said, the administration was not doing much. We are asking the people to do more. We are talking about very aggressive change increases in solar, but it is not taking us to anywhere near our goals. We are still have from energy related, and if you include economy wide, this will be still pretty close to, this is 4.9, close to 5. Can you imagine if you include what candidate Biden is talking about, economy wide by 2050, economy wide, where I would include transportation, we are still there. This is just to remind you that we are making very major increases in solar and wind capacity. So let's look at the carbon-free electric power. Carbon-free, okay? So we are taken out a certain fraction. You see, if you look at just the carbon-free, the renewables contribute less than 30%. Nuclear today is more than 50%. Do you know that Maryland and Virginia nuclear contributes close to 35%? A few days in a week of the electricity you are now enjoying comes from nuclear power. Think about that. And many states, only a handful of states have included nuclear in their what they are now calling their portfolios, and they have been asked to include nuclear. This is from, again, a handful of states include that in their future energy plans, but not all the states. They're not giving that, and even when they do, they're not giving it, not putting it on the same level playing field, not giving the credit it deserves, because nuclear, as opposed to solar and wind, does not need those helping hands, if you will, like battery storage. And by the way, in the windmill, I told you where it stalls. You may not know this, but in many places where wind is generated, they use combustion turbines to turn those wheels to give you power, because there is lack of wind. So they use, and in the areas where there's hydropower cheap, they're even using hydropower to help the wind. So this is all happening with solar. While there are credits, there are two major aspects. It's the whole chapter by itself, but I want to just mention to you very quickly that states have adopted what they call their portfolios, renewable energy portfolios. And only a handful are putting nuclear there in it and kind of changing it to zero carbon and so on. Those names get changed. But that is one thing, portfolios which give credits to these energy sources. The other big thing is the pricing. So whenever renewable becomes available, that is brought on and given the higher price, while the other sources, including coal and nuclear, don't get the price. So and that is a whole big subject in itself, that nuclear is not on the same playing field as the other fields. So this is our total carbon picture. And in the next slide, you see the gap. There is 63% gap in our total power, which needs to be filled with carbon free, right? That's what we want, or carbon neutral. Right now, those carbon capture technologies are not adding anything significant, so I can't speculate on that. But so we are going to look at how to fill this. So that's our next focus, is how best to fill this so that we can see what we can do. So I have looked at certain scenarios. One thing that would come automatically to mind is to fill it with solar and wind, right? I mean, that's what some of the political fractions want, is to just go with go with solar and wind. And this shows you the comparison. Again, let's focus on just the latter years, 2035, 2050. This shows the reference projections that we have used so far and the increase that would be needed. So even those aggressive, by 2050, those aggressive assumptions that I showed you have to be doubled. And by the way, I have increased this in the same proportion as the reference now, but expanding wind is much harder for the reasons I just indicated than solar. So if I had to do a better job here or use some other assumptions to more complicate, the solar fraction would be more. You would expect solar to go and wind not to go so much. But still, we are talking about going 200% close to that, or 175% over those aggressive assumptions to do this. How can we reduce this? So suppose we say, now you saw that the nuclear was going down. Suppose we allow the existing nuclear and keep enhancing and not increase the nuclear, but kind of keep to the same and enhance it. Perhaps we're building a couple, 2, 3 nuclear power plants in the remaining years to 2050. Uh, and we'll probably get a chance. There are some really very exciting things happening, and which I want to share with you. I'll come to that in a moment. But if you use the level of that nuclear, not full nuclear, but just some, you can call it existing level, roughly existing and enhanced level, you would bring down the needs, but still you will require more than the reference, probably 30% more than the reference challenges. It may be doable if we focus now, and there is a revolution in battery technology, if there is a revolution in carbon capture, where we can again take some credit for trying to reach that net zero emission. And if we drive down the costs of solar even further, but battery storage would have to be revolutionized, then perhaps this is possible. And if you want the arrows to go down even to the reference level, you would have to build more nuclear power plants. That would mean building perhaps 7, 8 nuclear power plants, more, 8 plants a year. And we are not in capacity to do that. Right now, we are building just 2 which have been in construction, but then no more are planned, and it's all zeroed out and going down. Okay, so when we look at the CO2 emissions, the transportation sector is here, and the electric with the 2 assumptions. Okay, I beg your pardon. These are 2 other alternatives I have looked at. So you saw up to now, just to recap, up to now you saw filling that whole ring with carbon-free electricity, solar and wind, and how you can reduce it with nuclear. So that was, these 2, 3 scenarios were carbon-free. Now, one of the logical things that people may want to do with cheaper gas is to fill the gap with gas. So if you look at, don't look at 2019, please, because that is kind of history. So just look at 2050. Transportation, as I said, doesn't make a change, and the electric fraction does decrease because you're replacing coal with gas. And if you go down to the existing level of nuclear, not total, not increase, not build too many more nuclear power plants, but just maintain, you will come down further. But very interestingly, the electric part is getting down to 500 metric tons of CO2 from power production, which is what one of the UN goals was. But again, they were talking about zero energy, but we need to fill out something else. But this is making some progress, but still not much. If you look at CO2 and add it, this decreases overall, is probably 15% or so, 15 to 20%, something like that I'm eyeballing. So it's not reducing, you see? So even with filling the gas, which some people say, let's continue with gas. And yes, fracking, yes, of course, you will need fracking. You can do it safely. And you could use fracking to use gas to as a transition, which again, presidential candidate Biden emphasized in 2, 3 debates that he would like to go use that as a transition to power. And I think that is probably wise. That is inevitable. So you have to use gas because you can't build nuclear. And so this option of going here with gas is probably what is going to be happening. But we'll have to go much more. But here is the bottom line, is that we are making very little progress with releases, even to 2050. So I would be remiss if I don't point out to you that the other option category. So the first we filled with clean, then be filled with gas, reducing with existing level of nuclear, which is clean. And here saying that the whole gap can be filled with nuclear. Can it be? Is impractical, because this would mean, if you calculated about 400 gigawatts, it would probably require something like 350 large nuclear power plants. And this is not happening. So, my friends, we have come to the peak here, the destination. And I want to just mention to you, in light of the last one, you are used to seeing this nuclear power with uh, with the power plants in existence with dry cooling towers. Some of you think that the steam coming out is something gas, but it's not. It is, a lot of people misunderstand water vapor comes out. But this is not even what we are talking about as part of some of the small modular designs. And I want to just spend a minute on that to probably introduce you, because you have not seen it. People are nowadays talking about integrated parks. Here is a picture of an integrated park where you have solar panels, where you can have windmills, where you have nuclear power and other sources of cogeneration, district heating, hydrogen production. A lot of these things can be possible with nuclear, small modular nuclear. So remember the word small modular nuclear. There are exciting things happening, and quickly let me mention to you. First of all, after nearly half a century, my friends, the Democratic Party has included in its democratic platform the word nuclear. And if you go and look at the democratic platform, it's saying there is a sentence there. It says that net zero, we want to go towards carbon neutral. There is another term, net zero, keeping all energy options, including solar, wind, blah, 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 and advanced nuclear. And by advanced nuclear, I'm not sure if the politicians or media understand it, but what we are talking about are often small modular reactors, 200, 300, they're about quarter size probably, and they can be built in modules. They are factory built, they can be transported by barge, put inside, and then there are micro reactors which can be put together in just a year, and small modular in a few years. And their big advantage is they can provide stable power, but yet also for small grids. You see, right now, nuclear provides the base load, 24 in and out power in Virginia, in Maryland, all over the country, 100 gigawatts, 20% you saw nationwide. Now, that is base load. Those plants cannot follow the load quickly as gas can, for example. So these small modular reactors are talking about load following. We have designs, and bipartisan bill this March, last March, this 2020 March, there were two bills that were passed with bipartisan support that support this advanced nuclear. And at Idaho, we are building two demonstration projects of different kinds. I don't want to get into details that are going there. Another major thing that is happening is the US, American companies are talking to other countries. For example, I might have a quick slide here. Yeah, this is Westinghouse's eVinci micro reactor, which is talking about just 20, 30 megawatt for a remote destination, small grid. It is a micro reactor. So they call it micro reactor. So they are talking about these advanced nuclear in this light, and this can be built in smaller countries, and that's why other countries are talking about these countries, inviting the US companies, like there are so many other companies that have come up, like X Energy, Holtec, TerraPower. My friend who is probably in the audience, he sent me an email. I hope you're going to mention it, and so I'm going to mention it. that Bill Gates has been involved in the TerraPower, and they are talking. They did not get much support from the US, but they are getting it in Europe, and China is talking about collaborating with them to build a thing. So there are other countries even that are taking that, and we need to grab this initiative of developing nuclear, and perhaps not 61%, but trying to do the enhance our clean options of doing that. So that would be one other way to go. So where do we stand, my friends? I think we are in good time because it's like an hour and a half. We are on the last slide. And now I would invite you to let your minds jog and come to thoughts. What do we need to do? So let me first introduce you to what we have talked, what I see as a kind of a summary conclusion. Where do we stand? And we are standing on the peak, by the way, of my thoughts here. And here you see the view and where we may be able to go. We are seeing an impossible thing. That is what I've tried to paint. I'm not sure if people have been telling you the truth, because when you combine the global warming with our energy needs, and as I said, shutting down or closing down our energy power sources is not the solution, is not the option. So we have to keep marching with our, remember those proportionality curves I showed you. Okay, so it's a daunting problem to go even carbon neutral by 2050. We have to recognize, my friends, that what we have focused in the last several slides is US. And we took the cue from those international the scientists and their scenarios to come down to US power. Remember that the US owes something to the rest of the world for the historic pollutions too, besides being a power that can lead, has already led the way. So I think that the US needs to lead, of course, sign the Paris Peace Accord, of course, develop policies and regulations that will guide us towards those goals, set new goals to do that, and also assist other countries. We can make technology happen because, again, remember, while we derive the contributions that US can make, US is not going to be able to solve the problem even if we reach zero neutral. If the world doesn't reach it, we haven't succeeded. So we are a member of a team. We have to recognize we can lead the team if we wish to and guide it. And as I mentioned, we have technologies. You know, China is building 60% of all the components of solar and wind. China, I will tell you, I told you about the goals of turning around and going carbon neutral by 2060. That is just amazing goal. But let me also tell you that they are today building 24 nuclear power plants. 24. They are at the half of the US level. And in 10 years, they will exceed the nuclear power that US generates. And do you know something? That China started on nuclear power program, you will be astonished, only in the 80s, early 80s. I mean, they had nuclear, but nowhere, they were just 1 or 2 gigawatts, almost like the same level as India 30 years ago. But look at and in the last 20 years, they have made very rapid progress. They have their own designs. They took the US design, kind of developed it further, and now they're building for some other countries, including UK and Pakistan. So they have taken the lead and propagating their version too. So we have a chance to lead. We already lead the world in the standards, the safety standards and regulatory standards for the need. So we really need to go in that nuclear area too. Now, towards that 2050, we clearly, towards those goals and towards the world thing that we talked about, the other big thing is to build a bridge to clean power. So first, very quickly, let us look at what we can do with the current current, remember, present technologies with enhancing or evolving them rather than, just completely revolutionary. So the first important thing to use renewable and wind is the battery storage. And what I did not focus on, but I did refer to it for solar, because this is so site dependent. You can produce wind all you want, but unless you can carry it to the places where that need, from mountain and mid-continent states to where the power is needed, the infrastructure is going to be of no use. So you need the massive infrastructure. You need trillions of dollars, my friends. And revolution in battery storage. One thing I was telling you the story with the Tesla stocks, their stocks came down the day after the battery day. Do you recall there was a few weeks ago, the battery day, when Tesla talked about, I think, a $25,000 electric car. And people asked him about whether all the technology was there. And he said, no, the technology was not there. The next day, the stocks dropped. You hear that? So we need to make, I mean, this is almost revolution, but I'm calling it like still evolution of the existing. But we will need to make very major improvements here. This is a very key thing, to use our renewables. Otherwise, solar and wind are going nowhere. Those aggressive assumptions and going even multiples of that. Then we need to do, of course, electric transportation. And remember what I was focusing on. The more you electrify, the more electricity you're going to need. And the more need for those things that I talked about, including nuclear, clean nuclear, and of course, more solar and wind. That is the right direction. I mean, I'm all for it, to go solar, wind, and nuclear. Carbon capture and storage, very quickly about that. People are using the word net carbon neutral and net zero. You see those words in the recent statements? Previously, they were fuzzing those. Now they are coming up. Why? Because they want to not say zero release, they want to say net zero. That means carbon capture. Now, it may seem easy to you, but believe me, read into the technology. Carbon capture, involves not only capturing the carbon, but also compressing it, transporting it, all that. But do you know that the major cost is collection of carbon dioxide? And why? Because the carbon dioxide has to be pushed through absorbers and many other processes, technological processes, and it requires power. Yes, my friends, power, auxiliary power to drive. So when you are producing this electricity, you're using part power or even a different kind of a power to push carbon dioxide through these media and capture it, and then you would have to liquefy it or compress it. That again requires power, and all of this costs money. And so the products that come from, so carbon dioxide, once stored, you can use it, of course, in nurseries. You can put it underground to pump oil or petroleum from the storage, because they are using that compressed CO2 in underground to push gas, by the way. So one versus the other. But you can also use it, indeed, for products where hydrocarbons are used. And they're expensive. You can make concrete, strength concrete. You can make synthetic materials from that carbon dioxide. You can make products out of that. But it is expensive, much more expensive. That's why it's very hard to see where it is going so easily. So again, that's a major change that will have to be made. Natural gas has to be used. And again, you can use natural gas with carbon capture. So once you develop carbon capture, you can use carbon capture, those technologies, to use natural gas more freely, right? So that's why it is so critical. And again, You can remember those stubborn, which I called you, industrial products? You can begin to use natural gas there. So that would help too. So you can take care of the industry's need, what it is trying to do with substituting gas for electricity. Uh, so that would go easier. And include nuclear power for all the benefits I mentioned. So there are two major things we need to do to make nuclear power. Not only do our both parties, people need to agree. Both parties today are have just are giving a stepchild treatment to nuclear power. It's very unfortunate that Republican Party, which has been supporting it quite intermittently, but indeed, but they have favored coal and oil more. And for politics, until recently, when we are talking about repository, they have even gone back on it. So it is the Yucca Mountain repositories have been taken out of it. So in a way, what I'm saying is that our nation, our leaders need to accept that. Then we will find solutions, because nuclear waste is not a technical problem. We have seen, and it has even licensed the repository by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission until we shut it down in 2013 or 12, 14, around that time, when the program was killed. The so okay, this kind of terms came about. And then advanced nuclear, small modular, I told you, that needs to be emphasized. In the long term, my friends, we are talking about solar, wind, and nuclear fusion. This is an exciting field. One of the first courses I came 55 years ago was on nuclear fusion, taught by one of the best people. It was 30 years away then. Unfortunately, until a few years, it was still 30 years. So decades pass and we keep pushing the fusion. But if you have been following the field recently, there is some hope. In fact, you can go and look up SPARC, SPARC, MIT and Commonwealth Systems have announced technology that they're going on plans and construction next year to demonstrate with very high intensive magnetic fields. That is the key difference, using higher temperature superconductors. And that high magnetic field, very shortly, my friends, just to tell you quickly, is going to give them the margins that are needed today for confinement of the plasma and the energy input to output, the ratios that they talked about, the Q values and so on. But using high magnetic fields is the key there. And so it may have been done from 30 years to 20 years. Also, the International Power Project, ITER, in being built in Europe, is making big progress. That's I think it's like 70 nations together have manufactured, and they're building that. And that should be also in about 10, 15 years, it would be at the stage of demonstration, 10 years or so. So that is nuclear fusion, and that could be long-term. So these are the long-term thoughts, and I will end here, and I will take your questions on comments and whatever. Thank you, my friends, and again, greetings to you.